BC flushes the mouse, and Hamilton plays for fourth in the East. This is Placed on the 55 with Jon and Jess. We're back for week 20, Jess, of the CFL regular season. How did you fare in week 19?
The only game I won was the only game that really didn't mean absolutely anything, which is the Battle of Alberta. So I took Edmonton to win. I almost think, did you go 4-0 last week?
I went 4-0. Woo! First time this season. It took me 20 weeks, but I finally got it.
In the CFL, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I started out well. You got, if we were football teams, you got the momentum going into Grey Cup.
Yeah, you went 1-3 last week. I went 4-0, and you're right. I'm definitely finishing this season strong. You were kind of like the BC Lions in a lot of ways. You started out really strong. You had a much better record than I. And then there was that little bit of a tough stretch in the summertime when you went something like 11 or 12 games without a win. Here you are for the season, sitting 32-42. Coincidentally, I'm sitting the exact opposite, 42-32.
10 games above or below 500, respectively. Unreal. The Vegas odds wouldn't have been like that in the beginning of the season.
No. And listeners, that's why I'm excited to announce this week we're going to have a draw. So you've got your chance to win $20 to help make up some of that money that you've lost maybe following Jess's advice. And all you have to do is go into the comments of this video and type the number 42. That's right, 4242, and you will be entered for a random draw to win $20, which in Canada is...
Oh, it's close to 30. That's 30, I think. Are those all single George Washingtons you got there?
It is. They look better that way.
Yeah, they do, actually. Money's
money, though. $20 on the line. So anything surprising about week 19? I mean, I have one tiny little thing to cover off.
Other than how poor BC looked and what was the biggest game of the season for them.
Bingo. That was so poor. I think you called the score something like 30-10, and you're like, oh, I'd put VA in at that point. And didn't they finish? I can't remember the score. It was terrible, though. Like
39-8, because the Lions only had 8 points going into the second half, and they couldn't even muster a rouge in the last 30 minutes. Unbelievable.
That's right. And the stats for the quarterback, it said that Nathan didn't actually do that much. He got 200 yards in the game. And then some guy named Chase Bryce came in for 92 yards. Is that the backup to backup?
Yeah, they put the third stringer in the fourth quarter. I have to admit, I bailed at that point. I bailed somewhere in the middle, the end of the third quarter. I just couldn't take it any longer. Just absolutely getting pummeled. There was absolutely no momentum on offense. And I guess Rick Campbell saw the same thing, because somewhere in the fourth, maybe even started the fourth. I don't know. As I said, I wasn't watching. Vernon Adams was dressed and sitting there, with his hands on his shoulder pads like he usually does. They didn't put him in. So did Rick Campbell just think this game's a waster now at this point, and I don't want to risk losing Vernon? So we've got to, or you put the third stringer in just to give him some meaningful reps, because I don't think he's played all season. Absolutely freaking horrible.
There might be two coaches looking for work after this season. Dave Dickinson, he's got a second job. He's GM of the Calgary Stampeders, so if he loses one job, he's got a second to fall back on. But Campbell, Campbell, I do not like his decisions. This week, at least he's putting VA in. They only have one game left in the regular season. That means nothing.
I thought Nathan was starting. Are they going to put VA in for the second half?
Yeah, announced yesterday, VA is the starter for this Saturday.
Oh, I thought, okay.
No, Nathan came out yesterday, had a little press conference, talked about how being a professional football player is all about performing, and he has not been performing.
I would put in, if I was Rick Campbell, I'd play one guy in the first half, another guy in the second half. Then I would base my decision on who's starting the playoff game in 2 weeks, almost based off of what happens on Saturday afternoon at BC Place.
Well, you put one guy in for half a game and he lights it up, and you're like, you have false confidence. We know VA can produce. VA was producing really at a really high level for the first half of this season before that injury. And if he can get one full game under his belt against a formidable foe, like Montreal's no slouch. So if he can get out there and come away with a win against Montreal, he's going to be the guy that they ride right to the Grey Cup. They're not going to go back to Nathan if VA does well this Saturday.
I agree.
It feels like Montreal clinched first place in the East like in August.
Because they ran away with it, and they were in the class of the league throughout the entire season.
Bigger news for me, something that hits hard in the heart. Tabbies are out. They're done.
Yeah, they've been out since August. How's that?
I don't know about that. Do you think Bo Levi is going to win most outstanding player? Like, he's killing it right now.
Maybe 10 years ago.
No. You look at his stats for the season. Like, he's up there.
The most outstanding player of the league cannot miss the playoffs. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's your opinion, eh?
Yep. And I'm sticking to it. That's like the Vezina Trophy for the top goalie in NHL, going to a team that finished 20th in the league.
Like, his production's been great. 26 touchdowns. Second place is 16. Like, he's throwing bombs. His interceptions, 16 to 15. So first and second, like, it's a clear gap between he and Zach Collaros for first and second. But the person who's probably going to get MOP is Brady out of Winnipeg. Well, let's get into week 20 because we do have 3 games coming up. I thought we had 4, but we only got 3. 7 games left in the season. And the first game on Friday, it's a bit of a snoozer because we got 2 teams that are both out of it now. We got Calgary and Hamilton. Calgary's got 4.5 points on this game. It doesn't mean much. Maybe Bo Levi will pad the stats a little. What do you think?
I think I'm going to go with my heart again. And obviously that's done really awesome for me this year. I want the Stamps and Dickinson to win that game, but they look so horrible against Edmonton. It's so hard to say. You know what? If Calgary's getting 4.5 free points, I'll take them.
Yeah, well, if you're not sure what to do, you take the points. That's always a safe bet. I'm going to go Hamilton just because I like betting on the tabbies, and I'd like to see Bo Levi put a few extra yards in his numbers and maybe challenge that perception that all of the sports writers have where you can't have an MOP that's not in the playoffs. I think Bo Levi deserves it. He's got the numbers to prove it. Let's go, Bo.
Now, in the CFL, it's not the most valuable, it's the most outstanding. So who has been most outstanding? That's usually the person that throws for the most yards and most touchdowns, not a guy that wins barely 6 games in a season. For that respect, he's not the most outstanding player. I can think of probably about 5 people that aren't more outstanding than him, at least.
But if we run the tape back and just listen to what your words from your mouth were just now, you said it's the player that throws the most yards and gets the most touchdowns. And that's Bo Levi. Yeah, he's got 6 wins. His team sucks around him, but he's the guy throwing the most yards and touchdowns, and they could be even better numbers by the end of this weekend. But let's get into game 2 and stop focusing on this mean-nothing Friday game and talk about what is probably another colossal mistake by the CTV putting the game on when they are on Saturday.
It absolutely pisses me off. Couple things about that. One, as I think I've said in a couple of weeks in the past, I don't have regular cable. I have a TSN only package that is supposed to get you every CFL game. The games that are on CTV on Saturdays at noon Pacific time, 3 Eastern, they're exclusively on CTV. Bell Media owns CTV and TSN, and the TSN guys are doing the games, and they have TSN microphones still. And TSN has 5 channels, 1 through 5, and they can't even stick that CFL game on like TSN 4 or 5. And what's actually even pissing me off even more are the start times. Noon Pacific. The second game starts at 4 Pacific and has since Labor Day. So now you got an hour and 15 minute gap between games for no effing reason. Either you got to have them 3 hours apart. If you're going to start the game at noon for some CTV reason, then the second game has to start at 3 o'clock. I don't get why they have such a passion for noon on Saturdays. It's stupid. And for a network that's done an extremely great job in covering the Canadian Football League.
Passion. Jess is passionate about this point. Take that, CTV. How passionate are you about the game itself? We got Ottawa, who's been a terrible road team, heading into Toronto. Are those 12,000 fans about to watch the Ottawa Redblacks get beat up by their Argonauts?
I don't think so. That's the only game of the week that actually means something. I'm going with my heart because this really doesn't freaking matter anymore. I'm taking the Red Blacks.
Well, if you're taking the Red Blacks, good news for you. That means you get 4.5 points as well. So you got Red Blacks and points on this one. I'm going to go Ottawa also. I think this game does mean something. I think this team wants to prove that they can win outside of their stadium. And maybe Toronto will feel the pressure and perhaps grip the stick a little too tight and lose this game for other reasons.
What, they're gonna feel pressure from those 12 to 15,000 fans.
Final game of the weekend. Montreal's heading into BC. It doesn't mean anything in terms of standings or the schedule, really, because it's BC's last game. I think it just means something in the respect that you got to figure out who the quarterback is going into the playoffs here. It's uncertain right now. The guy that you thought was going to be your number one, who you paid like a number one, just hasn't been it.
It's a moment ago what you said about the Lions paying Nathan like he's a first stringer. Well, they're not paying him like he's a first stringer. He's the highest paid player in the whole league. Yeah, I hope we see both of those quarterbacks in that game on Saturday.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to see both quarterbacks this weekend. I just want to see VA go in there, play bell to bell, win the game. I don't care if he wins by 10 points or 2 points. I want to see him get out there and put some production on the field.
Well, and if that happens, then you're pretty much guaranteed that he's going to start in the playoffs.
And he should. Look at the results, man. I know you love Nathan because you're hooked on 2022, Nathan.
Yeah, you might be right. I'd still would like to see both quarterbacks.
Nathan's the Deshaun Watson of the CFL. You're paying him way too much, and he's not doing anything. Let him sit over there and put the guy that you know can produce on the field and get you to the end.
This is really crappy to go into the playoffs. It's the last game of the season, and we have no clue who's going to start in the playoffs. It sounds like an enviable position, but it's also kind of crappy because first string quarterback needs to take the majority, we're talking 80, 90% of the reps in practice. You can't have two guys splitting the reps in practice. That would be horrible. Neither of them are going to be ready.
Whatever decision is made by Rick Campbell, he's going to take the blame for it. It's too bad. Do you have an official pick on this game? The BC Lions are giving up 2 points with the spread.
I know. The only thing they have to play for, the Lions, is that it's once the last game, 2 hits at home, and 3, you don't want to go into the playoffs with a crazy losing streak, which you're on right now. For that reason, I guess I like the Lions to cover that 2 points.
Yeah, Montreal's looking ahead to next week against Winnipeg, and they see that as an important game. They don't want to head into their bye week with a loss against what's probably going to be the team they face in the Grey Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure who to take, so I'm going to take the points and go Montreal.
Probably not a bad idea.
BC's got a bye after this, so it gives them some time to figure things out.
I bet you they'd like to have 2 more games to get their quarterback situation figured out. Who would have thought signing the most expensive player in the league would turn out to be lackluster?
All right, well, that wraps up our predictions for Week 20, Jess. Not a lot of games left. Are you going to actually catch that game on Saturday, or is the start time so screwy you're going to unfortunately have to miss it?
I'm going to have to unfortunately miss it. There's a provincial election on Saturday, and I'm going to be helping out a certain party.
Let me see if I can guess which party. They got a chance.
Yep.
If you want to write the show, you can at placedonthe55pod@gmail.com. Jess, before we go, were you watching All in the Family and felt some little tingle of inspiration and decided to write your own lyrics to the melody? What's happening here?
Well, I was just thinking to myself, back when the Lions were, really good this season and in seasons past, those were the days for the BC Lions.
All right. Well, and for our listeners, if you're wondering what Jess and I are talking about, at the end of this episode, listen closely because we're going to have a special bonus for you.
I call it All in the CFL. Songs that Del Richard played. Songs that made the hit parade. Fans like us, we had it made. Those were the days. And we knew we were gonna win back then. Ooh, we kicked field goals and we would win. We could certainly use another man like Doug Flutie once again. People seem to be content. Everyone paid the ticket rent. Rough Rider fans were kept in a circus tent. Those were the days.